So let's talk about Bitcoin. I did some rough math this morning, and of my unencumbered investable assets, and by unencumbered I just mean my liquid investable assets, of my money that's not in my house or in my business or in inventory, of the money that we have, my family, that we have to invest, somewhere between 25 and 30% of that is in Bitcoin or Bitcoin adjacent investments like MicroStrategy. And I'll get into in later videos about why I invest in MicroStrategy in addition to Bitcoin and all of that. But let's just talk about why that I have a fairly concentrated, heavy position that most people would not recommend and that I don't recommend for most people. But why do I have somewhere between a quarter and a third of my investable money in Bitcoin? I want to do a series of shorter videos going over this, maybe 3 or 4 main reasons. But I want to start with the main reason that I invest in Bitcoin. The main reason that I invest in Bitcoin is that I believe that monetary debasement, the inflating away of your purchasing power, is a moral issue. I believe that the way that central banks have functioned over the years is a moral issue. It is an evil thing to steal people's purchasing power by adding liquidity or money to the money supply year after year after year after year. And it harms certain people much more than it harms other people. In fact, it helps one group, the haves, and it hurts the other group, the have-nots. It hurts the working class, wage-earning savers. It hurts them the most. Who it helps are the people who own the assets that benefit from an increasing money supply. People who own a lot of real estate. People who own a lot of stocks. People who own a lot of assets that are not printable, that they are not making much more of on a whim, that some central banker can't press a button and create more of at the drop of a hat. Because when you print money and you add money to the money supply and you debase the money, the fiat currency, you debase the dollar, what happens to those harder assets? What happens to real estate? You've heard people say, oh, they're not making any more real estate. They're not making any more land. Might as well buy land. Why do people look at it that way? Well, because they're right. And because on the flip side, what's left unsaid there is that they're not making any more land, but they are making more dollars. And so when they make more dollars, the price of that land goes up. And we have seen this. We're shaped by our experiences. I graduated high school in 2008. We all know that was the great financial crisis. That was the big housing bubble that burst. That's when we saw housing prices just collapse. But what have we seen since then? What have we seen since 2009, 2010? We've seen this amazing long bull market in everything. We've seen the prices of houses double in many places since then. We've seen stocks go up at 15% a year or something like that. We've seen the price of gold continue to blow out. We've seen the price of Bitcoin just do incredible things. And what does that tell us? Does that tell us that those things got that much more valuable? I don't think that's what it tells us. I think it tells us that the number of dollars in the system has grown exponentially. And so therefore, the price of assets has inflated exponentially. And that's why it helps the people who have owned and held those assets. Who it has hurt are the people who don't already own real estate, who don't already own a house, who don't already own a lot of stocks. The have-nots, the working class, the wage earners. You hear people talk about the wealth gap in this country and really in the world. That so much of the wealth, so much of the value is at the top. The top 1% owns this much. The top 10% owns nearly all of the assets in the country. And the thing that is making that worse and worse and worse is the debasement of your dollar. Oliver Anthony song came out. That's what he said. The dollar ain't shit and it's taxed to no end. Yeah. That's a vulgar way to put it, but it's right. It's right. And that's because the dollar is controlled centrally by the central bank, by the Federal Reserve. And so the first reason that I buy Bitcoin is a moral one. I believe that it is morally wrong to print money and to steal people's purchasing power. It's an insidious way to tax them. It's why they've been able to keep tax rates relatively low. You know, we haven't really seen our tax rates go up over the last 15 years all that much. You know, they're able to keep extending these tax cuts because they're taxing you in other ways. They're printing money and devaluing the dollars in your pocket. And that's how they fund these never-ending wars. And that goes back, that's not just a new thing in America today. That's how wars have been funded throughout history. You can't go to people and say, well, we're going to need to tax you at 90% because we've got to fund this war. If they had come to us and said, hey, we want to go defend Ukraine against Russia, we're going to need to increase everyone's taxes to 75% to pay for that, there would have been a totally different response. And so they didn't do that. Instead, they print money and they send it to fund these wars. To me, that just shows you the immoral nature of money printing. And so why do I invest in Bitcoin? Because I believe Bitcoin is a hard and sound form of money. I believe Bitcoin is a solution to that problem. I believe that Bitcoin functions much like people have wanted gold to function. It is a more perfect form of gold, not perfect, but a more perfect form of gold. Some people believe it's perfect, but it basically has a finite supply. And we'll get into that later, how it has a finite supply, how the supply is limited, why no one person or no one company or no one country can print more Bitcoin. It will be capped at 21 million Bitcoin. Meanwhile, the money supply will continue to be printed and will continue to grow and grow and grow over the years. So if that's interesting to you and you want to know more about why 30% of my money is in Bitcoin and Bitcoin equities, stay tuned for the next episode. I'll get into more of the details about how I invest in that and why, and hopefully talk a little bit more in layman's terms about the technical side of why I believe in the thesis that Bitcoin is not printable, that Bitcoin will not be debased in the same way that fiat currencies are. So stay tuned, guys. Have a good one.